Just Sew with Monty. Today we're going to do a welt pocket, and this can be a little intimidating. It gets a little confusing, so I'm going to try to show you some methods to keep it organized and understandable so that you don't get overwhelmed by the process. First of all, let's go over the pieces. This little piece right here represents the body of the garment, and this little area is the marking for the welt pocket. On the back side of this, I have marked this very same rectangle on the back. Now, the key to this is you want to use a fabric marker, and you want a nice crisp point on it so that you get a really sharp line. You don't want a fat line. This has to be very precise. Now, another thing we're going to do here, I'm going to show you how to do this so that you have it marked on both sides, because you need to have, you may sew over here, but you need to pin your pieces over here. And if you don't have them marked identically, it's very difficult to get those in the right place. So we're going to do a little something on the sewing machine to make that a lot easier. Now let's go over the rest of the pieces. This is the actual welt, and this is the pattern. And if you note, it's got notches. You see them better on the back side because there's interfacing on here. There's notches to help you gauge where you need to sew this up. Now I've put interfacing on the back to keep it crisp and stapled, and then I've pressed it in half so that the folded edge will be the top part of my welt. It's a 1/2 inch welt. So that's that. Now these are the pocket pieces. This will be the top pocket right here, and it too has notches, as you can see, for placement so that we get this in the right place. Okay, now there's one other piece. This is the bottom pocket. Now, on the bottom pocket, I've added a little extra something here. Now, this isn't necessary. A lot of times, if your lining is complementary to yourself, or it is the self, you may not need this. But what I did, right here where the pocket welt goes, right behind there, I've sewn a piece of fabric, just a strip of fabric, no interfacing. I finished the edges off so it won't ravel, so that if you stick your hand in the pocket, what you see is more of the self, and you don't see the bare lining in there. Again, this is optional. It's not necessary, but you might find this handy if you're sewing on something and you don't want to see the lining when the pocket opens up. Okay, so we're going to go to the sewing machine, and I'm going to start showing you the steps of how to put this together. I'm talking now about this little rectangle, and before I mentioned that the rectangle needs to be apparent on both sides, the good side and the bad side. The best way to get this identically reprinted or reestablished on the good side is to base a stitch around through here as close to this line as you can get. That way you'll see it on both sides. So how we do this is, I've got my machine set on a 5, which is a long stitch length, but I want to be able to pull it out in case I need to when I'm all finished with my welt. I don't want strange stitches in there that don't need to be there. I'm starting at this little off center of the rectangle. I'm not backing up because I want it to be able to come out easily. And I'm going to sew very slowly all the way around this rectangle, making sure that I get right on top of the line. And when I come to the corner, if I have to, I'll pick my foot up and readjust where my needle goes. A little bit off there, but I want that needle right on the corner. That's really important because all the stitch is mimicking this rectangle for me on the other side of the fabric. So and it has to be a big stitch, so you have to be very careful and take your time. But it's worth it because this is going to give you the precision you need to get this welt in here properly. So just go very slow. Just turn your speed down if you have to go slow. Stay on your line. And you don't, like I said before, you don't have to back up when you start or stop. Just make sure you always end on the corners. Needle in, foot up, and turn. So when I get this done, I will have the same rectangle on the other side of my fabric so that I can see exactly where I need to put my welt. So again, line it up right on the corner. And then when I come here, I'm still not going to back up. I'm going to just overlap the stitches and leave them be. I want to be able to get them out if I need to. And I overlapped about 3/4 of an inch. And I'm going to cut the strings here. What you have is a stitched rectangle on this side, see? Now I can see this on both sides of my fabric, so it's going to make it a lot easier to put this welt in my pocket together. So the next step is, we have our rectangle. I'm going to place my welt, remembering my notches. My notch is going to go right up here, and the other notch is going to go right there. And I'm going to pin it down. So I'm just going to pull it out of here and pin it down. Now I want to stitch, I'm going to be stitching on the back side of this. So I want my welt to be pinned down. I'm going to pin outside my rectangle so I don't have to pull the pins out as I go across. First I'm pinning the two edges, and then I'll pin the middle. So I want to make sure, and I'm looking at the right side because I want to make sure that when I stitch this at a 1/2 inch, see, I'm right on my stitch line. See, that's the end goal right there. So I'm going to go ahead and pin it on the wrong side because I'm going to sew on the wrong side of this. Now, I've got that pinned on and I know it's in the right place. The next thing I'm going to do is put the top pocket bag on. So I'm going to take this little piece right here, which is the top pocket bag, and I'm going to do the same thing. I want to put it right on top of my welt. So I'm going to just go in here and I'm going to pin it down, again, right on top of the welt. It's got the same notch sequence, so it's very easy to line it right up. And then we're going to turn it over to the wrong side once we have it pinned down. See, and I put my pins on so I can pull them out from the wrong side. Then we're going to come in here and we're going to sew right across the bottom line. Not the sides, not the top, not the sides or top. We're just going to sew here. I'm going to back up and I'm going to stay right on top of that line, and I'm going to sew my welt and my top pocket together. So I'm going to lower my stitch down because I was using a, I'm going to go up to 3 here. I want to go 3. I was using a base stitch and I don't want a base stitch to pin this all together. So, and now I'm sewing right across the bottom line, and I'm going to back up. I'm using this 3 stitch length, so I'm going to go a couple stitches forward and I'm going to back up, making sure I end right at the point of my stitch line. And I'm going to come right across through here, going very slow and trying to stay identically on top of the stitch line that I put in here to watch. You can see how much easier it is to do this if you have this stitch line on here, because pinning this is really difficult if you don't have a line on both sides of your fabric. And the stitch line gives you that very thing without risking damaging your fabric with ink or some other method. So the bottom is stitched on. Now we're going to look at the top pocket. Now remember, we have this little area right here. Now the top pocket, or the under pocket, is going to go like this. And we want to fold these little edges down. I'm just going to temporarily pin them out of the way so we don't accidentally catch them. So I'm just going to fold them down for the moment. Like that on the right side. And then I'm going to put my top pocket. Now it gets a little confusing. This is why you have to lay it out and think about it if you're having trouble. So I've got this marked here because I didn't want to lose my position. When I'm done, I want this line to be on top of that line. So I'm going to sew it like this. I'm going to take the top line here and put it on top of this line right here. So I'm going to go in here and I'm going to lay it out, and I'm going to pin this corner to this corner, making sure I line it up. And I'm just going to temporarily pin it here because I'm going to flip it and sew it on the other side in a moment. But I want to make sure these two corners are on top of each other, and then I'll flip and sew it on the other side. Because I want to stitch it on my actual pants side so that I don't get it crooked. So that's going to go there. Now I'm going to turn it over here, and I'm going to repin it on this side so that I can stitch on this upper line. It's really about learning the placement of these things. It gets a little confusing, but stitching this out is probably one of the best tricks you'll ever do to make a welt pocket. Otherwise it gets really crooked and out of shape. So now I've got that pinned down, so I'm going to come in here and I'm going to get right back on top of the corner, and I'm going to stitch forward a little bit and back. So I'm going to go forward a few stitches and then lock stitch it by going back. I'm still on my 3 length, and my speed is slowed down. I don't want to go too fast here. And I'm going to come all the way to the other side, and I'm going to stop right in the corner. So I want to make sure I am right in that corner when I stop. Very important, even if you have to lift up your foot and place the needle, and then once you have it there, needle in, just back up a little bit so that you lock the stitch. So now we have all the pieces attached to the garment. The top pocket, the under pocket, and the welt. So everything is attached here. So the next step we're going to do is we're going to take all of our pins out, and we're going to take our small scissors, and you need a good pair of sharp, small scissors to do this next step. We're going to cut the opening and turn all this to the other side. So let me get my other scissors and we'll cut this, and I'll meet you back at the ironing board to show you the next step. So I'm back at the ironing board, and I've got everything stitched onto my welt area. And over here I've flipped everything out of the way so I don't accidentally cut my under pocket or my top pocket or my welt. So I've got the gap there, and I'm turning it over here, and I've drawn a center line with 2 Y's at each end. So I'm going to cut right on this line. Now I like to start in the middle and fold it and make a little hole. That way I know I'm getting in there safely and I'm not cutting anything else that I don't need to cut. When you get to the Y, you want to cut just this top layer as close to that corner as you can get without cutting through the stitch. So just as close as you can get without compromising the stitch. You can see by drawing this or sewing this rectangle on here, it makes a huge difference in how this is caught. So we're going to go here, and we're going to go right in the corner. Now you want to get as close as you can there. So make sure you do, otherwise it's not going to turn properly. See? Now we're going to turn everything to this side. So we're going to turn the top pocket. There's your top pocket turned in, and now we're going to pull, the under pocket turned in. Now we're going to pull the top pocket and the welt around. See, and as you turn these, it's going to look like this. And it's going to take a little bit of playing around before we get it just right. We want to tuck in the sides of the welt into this little area that we just cut, just like such. So everything now is inside our welt rectangle. See? See how nice that is? It's like a magic trick. Now we're not done yet. We have the corners that we have to attach. But before we do that, we're going to give it a little press so that everything is where it should be. So I want to just line my pocket up, make sure my top and lower pockets, see, are lined up together, and that my welt is filling in that little rectangle just right. And we're going to give this a nice little press, pressing everything down. So there's no little wiggles or bumps or anything that shouldn't be there. Now you can see some of my basting stitch, but with a seam ripper I can take it out very easily, and look how perfect that is. See? The little scissors, see? That's your welt pocket. So now we're going to go back over to the sewing machine and we're going to finish it off. Now we're ready to finish sewing our pocket up. So we're going to go underneath here and see these little triangles where we cut the Y? We're going to sew right along the edge of that and tack all of this down right through here. We're going to do it on both sides, and then we're going to sew our pocket bag up and we'll have a pocket. So let's go over here and do this one first. Now you want to probably back down to a 2.5 length, a little bit closer together, because this is a detail area and you want to make sure you catch it really well. And line your needle up so it's just catching that little triangle. You don't want to catch yourself, your top pant part. You just want that triangle, and you're just going to sew across through here, catching the welt, all the pockets, and you just go back up a little bit, like that. And that way you won't have a hole in your pocket. It keeps everything secure and keeps the welt in place. Now we're going to go over here and we're going to do the same thing on this side. I'm going to flip the self back and we're going to catch the welt, the top pocket, and the under pocket all together, just like that. It's really quite simple. The most confusing part about this is lining everything up and putting it in the right place. So hopefully this little video will help you understand that. And the best secret is sewing that rectangle in. But practice being precise, because the precision is what's going to give you the best looking pocket. And once you've done a couple of these, they're very fun to do and very impressive when you finish a garment and you have a welt pocket on it. It's not something you see every day. So now we have our pocket secure. So this isn't coming out, this isn't coming out. And I might have a little stitch there I might need to get out of there, I don't know, but this one's completely covered. Well, it's a little bit, but you can just pull it out with a seam ripper. That's why you use the 5/8 inch stitch. Now we're going to go around the pocket bag. So we're just going to go and sew this up. Now, after you've sewn it up once, you can come back in here if you'd like and sew it with a finished stitch around your outside edge. So I'm going to come in a little bit because I don't want it right on the edge, because I don't want to put something in my pocket and cause it to have a hole. So we're going to stitch right down through here, and I'm going to stitch about a 1/2 inch away from my pocket edge here, and I'm just going right above the welt, and I'm just going to go down through here and back up a little bit and then go all the way around my pocket. And I'm leaving a 1/2 inch so that if I were to put something in my pocket, it wouldn't ravel through and cause a hole to go through. When I'm done, I can go over to my serger or use one of my stitches on my machine and finish off the raw edge so that it doesn't ravel out. Now this pocket doesn't have to be square corners. You could round these corners. It makes it a little bit easier to sew if you like. You don't have to have square corners. Round works just as well. And then when we get right up here, we're going to go just above the welt. I got a big needle in here. And then back up. And now, except for the finish around the edge of the pocket, I have a pocket. See? Isn't that nice? Nice little welt pocket. Now, I'm just going to stay stitch this top edge along here. And sometimes when you're doing pockets like this, you may find that your under pocket or your bottom pocket won't align right with the waistline, but that's okay. As long as it's a little bit longer, that's all you really care about. You just want to end the seam line margin, and that way it won't pull out. And that's just a stay stitch, because this would be caught in the waistband of my pant if this was a real pant. And there you go. There's your welt pocket.